You're saying that.
Okay, we're live. We're good. We're ready to
Okay, we're
go.
live this morning, and good morning, everyone. It's Friday, and you won't have to see me for a couple of days. So, anyway, this morning, I think the first item on our agenda is a central garage. Tammy Ellis, I believe, will lead off. And I just want to add that that's an important part of the agency, as we all know. All those trucks are repaired there and serviced there, and she must be very, very busy because the trucks have been going quite a bit this week. And so if anybody drives by that place, you'll see a lot of action there. So, yes, good morning, Tammy. Are you with us this morning?
Yes, sir. Good morning. Good to see you again.
Well, good to see you, and thanks for coming during this busy time. I'm sure you've had a busy week, a lot of breakdowns.
Yeah, it's our busy season, that's for sure. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, those trucks are moving. A great job, too. They were all out there, and we're so pleased with everything that's happening. So,
thank you, sir.
why don't you lead off and tell the committee something about it?
Sure. If you don't mind, may I share my screen?
Sure, love to.
Okay. I'm sorry, give me just 1 second. It does not seem to be
No problem.
screen share. Did not have this trouble yesterday at all.
Well, we experience all the little difficulties here and there, but that's part of the job.
Okay, are you seeing this?
Yes, we do.
Yes, sir. Okay, thank you.
Tammy, tell us a little about yourself, because you came into this position a couple years ago, isn't it now, or how long?
Yes, sir, that's correct. So I actually have been with the agency. I started as a temp back in 1987 when I was attending Vermont Technical College.
Wow.
And I worked there for a couple summers as a temporary employee, and then I spent 9 years in construction, resident engineer, field inspector, various different positions there. Then I transferred into the district 1996, I believe, and worked in the maintenance district for several years as a project manager. Then became general manager. At the time, I was the youngest general manager in the history of the agency and the first female.
Wow.
And I was in that position for 5 years. And then subsequent to that, I became the district transportation administrator. That was back when the agency had divided up the district. So I was District 3 and District 4, then went through a reorg, and I was the DTA at District 2 and District 4. And I was in that position I actually kind of lost count, maybe 11 or 12 years, I guess, something like that. And I've been at the Central Garage now for a little over 2 years, I believe.
Well, great having that many years with the agency. That's, I find that's true with a lot of folks at the agency. We have a good variation of all kinds of people have been there a long time and different positions, and that's great. Good track record.
Well, thank you. And I think this position has fit my background well. I have not just a background in engineering and field work and many years with maintenance, which helps us serve our customer better, but I also have an MBA. So I try to apply a little bit of that business acumen to our operations at Central Garage. And I think that's, very helpful.
Just for the new members as well as ourselves who've been there, just tell us what the functions are of the Central Garage, please.
Oh, yes, sir. So the functions of the Central Garage, in essence, is that we're responsible for the maintenance of the fleet overall, which includes the procurement of the equipment. So we write all of the specs and work with our folks at purchasing to get the proper contracts in place and all of that. Best value for the taxpayer, put everything out to bid and procure the equipment. Obviously do that in line with working with our customer to find out what needs they have. So we procure the equipment, and we have a fleet management system, which is used not by every state, but a lot of the states, a majority of them. It's called M5. It's through AssetWorks, and it's a fleet management system. So we're able to track that piece of equipment, I say, like from cradle to grave, basically. From the time it's procured, it goes into the system, and we can tell you every nickel that is spent on that vehicle, including fuel that's put in that vehicle, up to the time that it's disposed of, and then that disposal cost offsets the life cycle cost of the vehicle. So we track all that data. And we can produce that data in various different ways to help us do analysis and better fleet management decisions about replacement cycles and things like that, which we'll talk a little bit about. And also, as the senator said, we have, a great team of mechanics and technicians that service all those. And in addition to that, we are also authorized warranty. We have our own warranty for International and for General Motors. So what that does for central garages means when we buy maybe about on average 30 International trucks a year to add to our fleet, it enables us to do service work that's covered under that warranty without having to send it back to an International truck dealer and wait for them to get to it. Our technicians are trained on their equipment. We have all the diagnostic software, and we're able to tap into those computers, do our own diagnosis, everything that the vendor would do for us at the dealership, we're able to do ourselves, and we're able to recoup that cost directly through International by documenting all of that. And that's where our M5 system helps us track all and document all that. So anything that's eligible for coverage under the warranty, we're able to expedite that work ourselves and get reimbursed from International for having done that.
Wow, that's a big feature, because I just
Yes,
wonder
sir.
about taking them back to the dealer. That would be forever. It would tie the truck up. Now you
Yes,
do
sir.
your own, and that's a good relationship
Yep.
to have with.
We also have that relationship with GM. And also in addition to that, we have a team that manages all of our parts procurement and parts inventory. And we have 5 service locations throughout the state, plus 2 outpost locations, so that we're out there where our customer is and are able to give timely service and keep the trucks on the road so that they're not having to bring stuff all the way to Berlin to get it repaired. We have a repair facility in Bennington. We have them in St. Johnsbury. We have them up in Chimney Corners. Like all corners of the state are covered so that we're there, and our service technicians have vehicles. They're able to go out and do response roadside if necessary, do diagnostics by the road, and keep that truck moving as best we can.
Great. Okay, any questions so far before she gets into the other parts? Just thought I'd give a general overview exactly what happens with the, because it's such a big part of our agency with 275 plow trucks and.
Yep. Yes, sir. It is. And I'll apologize if we run a little short on time. I had a half an hour planned, but yesterday with the House, it went on for like an hour, but there was a lot of questions, and I respect the fact there's some new members that maybe do want clarification.
2 items this morning, so we should, we'll work our way through it. So go right ahead. Go ahead, Tammy.
Yes, sir. So anyways, again, I'm Tammy Ellis with the Central Garage, and I just want to clarify a point that I made in my overview when I met with you all previously and talked about the purchase value of our fleet. The other thing that's a part of that is not only is it the purchase of the vehicle, so like, for example, we purchase a chassis, but then there's upfitting costs with that. So we purchase a chassis from International, and that's all we get. So we have another vendor that we have a contract with, and they do upfitting for us, and they put, what kind of body do you want on the truck? We have contracts with either Viking or Tenco. It goes out to bid. Different ones get it each time. But they put all the plows and the wings and things like that on it. Then it comes into Central Garage. Maybe it's going to have different spreaders or brine equipment or whatever it's going to have. It gets upfitted. And so those upfit costs really need to be taken into account too. And we do track that also in the M5 system. So if we were to say total replacement cost of everything in our fleet, considering purchase cost and the capital improvements that are done to it, you're talking about over $70 million worth of equipment is what our folks are responsible for maintaining. And we track the depreciation on all of that vehicle through each of its cycles. And the current depreciated value of all those assets is just over $30 million. But again, that replacement value is important to know. So just to give a quick example, I picked a example right out of our tracking system of a vehicle we upfitted for FY20, and the contract price for purchasing the chassis of a tandem truck, $111,000. The upfitting cost, putting the bodies, plows, wings, everything, lights, everything it needs, $84,000. So you're talking just shy of $200,000 for one of those big tandem axle orange trucks. It's not an insignificant investment by any means. Another point I wanted to make in regards to budget, I know if you look at the budget as it's proposed and presented, it appears as though the Central Garage is getting a 5.8% increase. But for those of you that are new to the committee, I just wanted to highlight the fact, as Senator Mazza is aware and other members that were here last year are aware, that we had a $651,000 cut in our equipment budget last year. And prior to that, in 2018, we had a $1 million cut. And I'm not bringing that up to focus on the past, but it is relevant to our future, and I hope to have time to explain why. So this is what our total budget is proposed for this year. And as you can see, out of that, $8.1 million is allocated to the equipment budget. And how the equipment budget is calculated, and I apologize, I can't articulate it quite as well as Lenny LeBlanc can, but in the gist of it is they look at all the depreciation of all the equipment throughout the fiscal year, the prior fiscal year, and that makes up a portion of our budget. Then the item listed as surplus proceeds is actually what you would know as auction revenue. So it's the equipment that we disposed of, we get money back for it, and then that comes back to the Central Garage to help us purchase new equipment. And then the difference of that is the supplemental transfer, which of course is all state funds. So a big portion of what we look at is this equipment budget, and those are the three parts. As we're currently funded under statute, those are the three parts that make up that equipment budget. And so when we suffer those cuts, it has impacts because we're keeping a piece of equipment longer, and by then it's fully depreciated, so we're not earning depreciation. So that lowers our revenue stream, if you will, for the equipment replacement. And also we're getting less for it than at auction, which then further lowers that revenue stream. So it's just an important concept to understand how our funding operates if you want to look into the context of the overall picture of fleet management. So some current challenges that are occurring and opportunities, and I do see a lot of our challenges as opportunities at the Central Garage. And some of these I'll go into in more detail further in my presentation, but I just wanted to give you a preview what's coming up. So we're going to talk about the age of our light and medium duty fleet. And most of you would think of that as like the real heavy duty pickups that we have that we equip with snow and ice fighting capabilities. I want to talk a little bit about how we're working to better utilize the existing fleet that we do have, and I'm going to show some examples of that. One of the current challenges we're having is recruitment, retention, and training of our qualified service mechanics and technicians. And as Senator Mazza said, these people are very critical to our operation, so we're looking to how can we do a little bit better in this area. Another challenge is the training of the district maintenance operators. As you know, there's been a lot of new people coming on, a lot of turnover in the maintenance, and we really look at ourselves as a partnership with the maintenance folks because those operators are critical to helping us keep the fleet in top-notch condition by doing routine operator maintenance. And it's a constant challenge for us to try to help keep those people trained up. Even though they're agency personnel, they're not Central Garage personnel, so we rely on that partnership with the districts to help us keep these people trained in what to look for, and what routine maintenance they as operators need to do. And we're going to talk a little bit about how we're preparing for electrification, the future of Central Garage. What does that look like? And what kind of things we're doing now to move in that direction. And I just wanted to talk briefly about the impacts that COVID-19 has had. I know it's impacted all of us. And I agree, Senator Mazza, it has had an impact in terms of how we deal with, our day-to-day interactions with our staff and the things that you get out of doing that. But it's had impacts on our staff. As you know, there's been hiring freezes. We've had difficulty recruiting. Under normal conditions, we're having more trouble under the COVID. It's impacted our auction proceeds because we had to delay one auction due to the COVID and the travel out of state restrictions. People couldn't come here to pick up equipment. We delayed that auction. We moved it from the traditional live auction to an online only auction. And now our latest auction has been on hold basically since fall, waiting for the same reasons. We don't want people traveling here from out of state, not quarantining and that kind of thing. And I do believe when it happens, it again will be an online auction. Supply chain issues, COVID's impacted not just us, right, but a lot of our suppliers, a lot of our vendors. Sometimes they're short on staff and help, or there's just not materials available, as you all know. It's impacted a lot of segments of our economy. And our vendors sometimes have been hit with staff shortages and supply chain shortages. So our vendors haven't been able to be quite as responsive to our needs as well. So it's a multifaceted issue for sure. I know most people in past years have been very focused on the age of the plow truck fleet, the big heavy orange trucks. But a good portion of our fleet, we've done very well over the years of maintaining that goal of staying under 15% that are over 8 years of age. We've done very well at that. But one area that has suffered, that is a big part of our snow and ice control and capability, is what we call our light duty fleet, but to the average person would be like a very heavy duty pickup. So I'm talking like maybe a Ford 450, something of that nature, if that helps, that's equipped with, the rear slide-in sanders, the plows on the front, and we use these as attack vehicles. We use these to go out to problem areas and be responsive to, if there's particular icy spots, hills, corners, but, that takes 2 hours sometimes longer for a plow truck to make its route. This allows our customer to go out and address those problem areas, to clean out the park and rides and to do other important functions of our snow and ice control. So they're a good segment of our fleet that I think has been under focused on. And as a result of some of those prior cuts, we're not meeting our goal in this area. So this is an area that we're trying to emphasize, and we're trying to kind of bring the average age of that fleet back down a little bit. And there's a lot of advantages to doing that. And one of the key advantages is for trucks in this category, they're generally covered by a 5-year warranty, even though we're using them for the kind of work that we use them for. And they're working in a high salt environment. They don't last maybe as long as a personal pickup would anyway. They're put under a tremendous amount of strain and stress. And so when we're not meeting this goal of replacing them in a timely manner, we're incurring costs due to the fact that they're now out of the warranty period, and some costs that would have been covered under warranty, or we could have recouped under doing our own warranty authority. We're missing out on that, and then we're paying out of pocket to do some of these repairs. So it has an impact. And I know for those of you that have been here before, you're familiar with this, but for those of you who are not, this is a basic kind of economic analysis about life cycle cost and looking at total overall cost of ownership, and how over a period of time, at first your cost of ownership over time goes down. But then later, as the vehicle gets a little bit older and it starts needing a little more repairs, pretty soon your cost of ownership goes up. And there's a prime area right in the middle where it's optimal in this window somewhere about right in here, to get rid of that vehicle for financial reasons. And to kind of give you a further example of that, all of a sudden my PowerPoint does not want to go forward. Ooh, this is a technical problem. We're going backwards. There we are. Yes, sir. Okay, so this is just a couple of examples when I was talking about the M5 system and the sorts of data that we can pull out and the analysis we can do. So this is an example of a Ford F450 that we had in our fleet. It was purchased in 2010. And at that time, back in 2010, that vehicle cost us roughly $58,000. I apologize because I had this on a sheet of paper here and I have now misplaced it. But anyway, normally we would have gotten rid of it somewhere around 2006, about July 2006 is when it was scheduled to be replaced. We estimated at that time, when we first purchased it, we estimated it would have around 90,000 miles at that time. And it wasn't replaced due to some of the aforementioned cuts that were impacting the district or the central garage budget. And so as you can see, around 2017, we ended up having to make some major investments to keep that truck back on the road. And again, I would point out, this is now no longer under warranty. And over the next few years, we put over $33,000 into that vehicle to keep it on the road and serving our customer. So if you look at $33,000 versus the original $58,000 price, that's considerable. And this is another analysis of the exact same vehicle, just looked at from a different perspective. This is the cost per use per annum and operating and repair. So you can see this breaks it out, operating and repairs, and it shows all the data. So now in 2021 costs, a comparable vehicle to purchase, outfitted exactly like that, to purchase the truck and upfit it. You're talking $100,000. So that's almost a double cost that's happened over the past 11 years in this vehicle. So whether you want to compare that $33,000 to the original $58,000 purchase price, or you want to compare it to the fact it was a third of a cost of a new vehicle. Either way, it was a significant investment that could have gone, towards replacement. And, and now we're going to get less for that vehicle when we sell it at the auction. So we've lost the depreciation revenue of that, and we're losing the value of the resale on that, as well as spending out of pocket costs to keep it repaired. So these are the sorts of factors that we have to look at when we're considering fleet management. And I apologize, sir, but I'm not sure where we are on time, and I want to respect your time.
Questions so far?
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yes, sir. So this is just our vision of what it looks like going into forward years. We have a kind of in an ideal world, this is what we'd like to do. And so originally, due to the prior cuts in the equipment budget, we purchased less chassis last year on the heavy fleet than we normally would. We try to do 30 a year to keep ourselves on schedule that I showed you, trying to keep the average age of the fleet down. Last year, we only purchased 17. So what happens in a normal year is we're purchasing 30 chassis out of this year's budget, but we're also upfitting the 30 chassis from the prior year. And that helps us balance the fleet and what's coming in and going out and keep that kind of on an even keel. Because we only purchased 17 last year, means we only have 17 to upfit this year at a cost of roughly $85,000 a piece. At our original intent, going back to my prior point about the light and medium duty vehicles, our original intent was to do a little more robust purchasing in that area to try to bring ourselves back up to our performance measure that we'd like to be at. However, a few things kind of came to our attention, and one of them being that the drill rig, which I'm going to talk a little more about if I have time, has been on the books for replacement for over 10 years. And when it was put on the books for replacement 10 years ago, the superintendent estimated roughly about $150,000 replacement cost. Now, because it's been dragged on for 10 years, there weren't money, and it wasn't replaced. Now we're having significant problems with that piece of equipment. It's having a lot of breakdowns. We're having to put a lot of time into it, a lot of downtime, and a lot of money to keep it up. And so we've looked into it, and what we're finding is that the actual replacement cost in today's dollars is going to be closer to $300,000. So we're going to take some of that money we're saving from the upfitting. We're going to invest in trying to get this drill rig replaced. And it's critical to the agency's operations. And the other thing that we're looking at that I'll talk a little more about further is we're actually looking at buying 4 tractor-mounted mowers. And if I have time, I'll talk a little bit more about why those decisions are being made. So here's and the example. This is the tractor-mounted, the loader-mounted mower. So one of the reasons we're looking at this is another area where our fleet is aged is in the tractor mowers. We own a fleet of tractors. They do a lot of the mowing. And I know the mowing can be a little bit of a controversial issue, but some of it really is safety related. And obviously the loader can't get off the road the same way a tractor can, but what it can do with this, it has quite a long boom, and it can get all those swaths that are most adjacent to the highway by sitting on the pavement and reaching out there and getting some of the slopes and clearing that, what we call the safety zone. So it improves the sight distance for the motorists, and it also allows them to see any critters that might be standing beside the road. And it opens up those lines of sights coming on and off ramps and things like that where the sight distance is critical. So it's the more safety related areas. But the other advantage to doing this is, rather than investing money in buying some more tractors, we could buy fewer tractors, but we're putting to work the loaders that we already have, that their low use time of year is in the summer months. They don't get that many hours on them in the summer months. They get a lot of hours in the winter when they're busy loading the trucks and moving salt, moving materials. So it's enabling us to better utilize the fleet that we have. And then we can invest in some tractors, but cut down on the number maybe that we have to keep and maintain. The other advantage to this is that, as you can see, we can take this engine, it has its own engine, and we're able to attach that to pretty much any loader in the fleet. So this attachment can go, from one area to another and enable better utilization of the attachment. So that's an example. So this is the track mounted drill rig that I mentioned, the $300,000 unit. And the reason that we decided to invest in this at this time isn't just of the breakdowns that it's occurring, but the fact that this vehicle works on a lot of our preliminary work for the highway designs. They go out and they have to do cores and borings like in advance of all the bridge projects and road construction projects, and most of them are federally funded. And that means that this crew, when they're working on that, it's an 80-20 match, and they're working under pretty much federal project money. And they're, as long as they're keeping this piece of equipment busy, it's being charged to that. When they have downtime, all of their time is being charged to state dollars. And it's all state dollars that are being spent to keep this thing repaired. And the one we own currently is in a bad state of disrepair, to be quite frank with you. Again, it was supposed to be replaced 10 years ago.
What's that big red machine there, Tammy?
Yeah, that's a track mounted drill rig, sir. So they go out, let's say if a project is being proposed to do a bridge project or something like that, they're able to bring this down over embankments or wherever they need to go, and they can actually do soil boring and cores and determine like where is ledge or where is bedrock and things like that that they need to know prior to construction.
Okay, thank you.
And so those are some of the reasons that we decided, even though we would have liked to have spent that money on updating our pickup fleet, we're investing in these pieces of equipment in lieu of that, just because we feel like overall interest of the agency that this is serving multiple interests, especially keeping this rig running, because we're holding up our ability to advance projects when this rig is down. So that was pretty much all I had, and I'm willing to entertain any questions.
Sure.
Oh, wait, no, I'm sorry. I apologize. I will pause for questions, though.
Go right ahead. Any questions so far?
I'll wait till the end.
Okay.
Yes, sir. So again, I had mentioned that we've been making an effort to improve the efficiency of our inventory that we have on hand for parts. And so that initiative so far, we've been able to reduce our on-hand inventory by $83,904 by looking at obsolete and slow-moving inventory, reducing that, consolidating and doing some internal transfers. And so of all of that inventory, what we could bring back to a vendor and get credit through a vendor, we did. And the rest of it that was obsolete for us and our fleet was sold at the auction, and those proceeds came back to the central garage. So we're kind of proud of the efforts that we've made in that regards to make ourselves a little more efficient. We're also working closely with BGS to help us procure some better contracting methods and utilize some national contracts that are out there that state DOTs can take advantage of. One of the programs we're looking at is actually through International Truck, and it's called Fleet Charge, and it would enable us to secure guaranteed pricing for all of our parts for the international trucks, regardless of what international vendor we go to. So one of the things I wanted to highlight is our initiatives that we're working on of achieving the goal of electrification. And obviously, as you're probably all aware, like the technology for something like a plow truck, in terms of electric, that technology is evolving. It's not really there yet, but there is other opportunities for us. Like I say, we do a lot that's other than the big orange trucks. So we're going to be buying several electric hybrid pickups this year, and we can do that quite easily. And we're looking at where our other opportunities lie. So some of the factors that go into deciding what you're going to. Yes, sir.
Senator Perchlik.
Can you go back a slide?
Yes, sir.
I just want to point out that that photo up in the right-hand corner of a Rivian truck is a electric vehicle manufacturer. And if you were to buy that truck, that manufacturer would not be allowed to open a service center in the state. So it's interesting. The AOT hasn't taken a position on that, but they use the photo of a truck that they can't have serviced in the state. But I just want to. Well,
again, sir, I'm really looking at the future as like, this is where are we looking to go? And so I apologize because I did just like grab that picture off the internet to use as an example. But again, as I said, these are the things that we're looking at and we are tracking. We subscribe to several publications that are fleet managers like throughout the nation. As a matter of fact, back in late January, we attended a presentation that was done by Volvo North America to talk about the advances in their technology and what they see the future of heavy trucks is in terms of electrification. So we try to be aware of what is going on and what's available. But like I say, it's kind of the future and what are we looking at to determine how AOT should move forward. So obviously, yeah.
No, I appreciate that. No, I'm glad to hear that. I think that's.
Yeah, and so obviously hybrid vehicles is something that's a little more realistic for us at that time. And that's why we've made that commitment to buy some hybrids and put them to use where the application is correct. But again, it's like, you've got to know what your application is. So this is right again off of national fleet owners. I just pulled some quick information. So you really need to think about the size of the vehicle, the size of your fleet, the location, right? And the purpose of the vehicle. So in terms of size, obviously smaller vehicles are a little easier to electrify. They use less energy to charge, and they run a lot longer on that charge. The bigger and heavier the vehicle gets, the more of a challenge it is. That kind of goes without saying. The location's important. Vermont is a cold weather climate. Batteries, don't like the cold weather as well. So like in California, for example, they've been able to do a lot more electrification. They got warmer weather. So that's a consideration. And the fact that we're in a high salt environment too, that's a factor when you're looking at application. And the other thing is too, it's the purpose. What purpose are you using the vehicle for? Because if you use it on a vehicle that's doing like a lot of starts and stops, that's actually beneficial. Things like buses and delivery vehicles, because it's that braking action that helps regenerate electricity and send that back to the battery. And it's helping generate some of its own fuel, if you will. And those vehicles have a given route. So they're predictable, like where your charge points can be. And they're generally parked at night or parked for long periods of time to allow you to re-energize them. So looking at it from a B-Trans standpoint, we understand that having the right vehicle in the right application is going to be what's critical, right? So we look at the infrastructure. What do we have for charging points to kind of sustain this and support this? And our customer needs. Doesn't do us any good to buy a vehicle that's not filling their needs. And also from my own personal perspective, I'd say it's the right customer as well. We have some customers we've identified that are very eager about electric vehicles. And I feel those are the ones we want to partner with because they're going to help us make this successful, as opposed to somebody that starts out thinking it can't work. They're going to try to find ways why it can't work. And so we've identified some internal customers that are very excited, and we're trying to partner with them to identify their needs and how we might be able to do this. So again, as I said, utilization is important. What's it going to be used for? Factoring in the fact that we have high salt environment. So is this going to be used in the winter and that kind of thing? And as you said, it was a valid point you brought up about the bender, because another consideration we have to figure is if we buy something, we may not necessarily be able to do all of the repair work to that vehicle. And we need to figure out what we buy and where we station it, and what is the proximity to a vendor location that is going to be able to help us and partner with us in the service and support of that vehicle. So that is a very important factor that you mentioned, and one that is right up there for us in terms of prioritization for sure. And operational redundancy, that's another thing we need to consider. So I'll give an example. Some of you are familiar with our bridge inspection truck. It's a very, very expensive piece of equipment. Probably it could be electric, but if it were, and it's our only bridge inspection truck, and maybe it has to go to somewhere like Ohio, for example, to be repaired because we don't have a service location here, then that shuts down our ability to accomplish that part of our mission. And we have such a small window in Vermont to perform those types of functions. So you don't want to go all in with something and put all your eggs in that basket and not have any operational redundancy. So with all of that taken in mind, here's some applications, some examples of the types of pieces of equipment that we utilize and have in our fleet where I feel getting an electric vehicle could be successful and could make sense for the agency. This vehicle in the upper left-hand corner is an example of what would be a sign truck, and this crew goes around and they work generally in a given day in one particular area, repairing signs or putting up new signs, and they're going kind of from site to site, but within a given area. So that truck's generally parked at night. It would have plenty of opportunity to be getting recharged. It's not having to drive great distances under huge loads every day. I think this would be a practical application, and it's something that we're looking at. Another thing that we're looking at is perhaps an application like this truck you see on the right-hand side of the screen. And what this is a supply truck that supplies like our paint vehicle. So they always have to have a vehicle with them. It's got like all of the cones and all of the surplus paint and all of the materials that they need. But this other contraption that you see is what's known as an impact attenuator. So this is utilized on any kind of slow-moving operation, especially out on the interstate, to protect those slow-moving vehicles from the fast-moving cars in case an errant driver isn't paying attention and they get rear-ended. So this is like a chaser vehicle that would be behind your paint truck or be behind a mower that might be working close to the edge of the interstate, and it moves along with the aero board to get traffic's attention and move them over during a slow-moving operation. And so this attenuator is following them around. But again, it's something that's generally parked at night. It's generally not, going vast distances during the day. And so these are the sorts of applications that we feel where an all-electric vehicle would have a good chance of being successful for the agency's fleet. So with that literally is what I had.
Okay, questions, Senator Ingalls, you had something?
Yeah. Superintendent, when I was with the town, we had a lot of issues with the international trucks as well as some of the towns around us, and we were starting to go away from them. And probably you were better suited to not have the same issues because it was all about warranty and getting them in there. But we seem to have been having a lot more troublesome issues in spite of not being able to get into warranty service quickly. Do you find that, or did you have any of those problems with the international brand?
We have not, but again, like I said, we are our own vendor, if you will. We're our own warranty administrator. So we have our technicians are trained up the same as as an international. I'm sorry, I'm trying to figure out, there I am. I'm just trying to figure out how to stop sharing my screen.
Nice bike.
That's a nice
Yeah.
bike. Is that one
Thank-
of your, that's one of your fleet?
That's the electric one.
Yeah. I'm sorry, it's just not letting me, oh, right there,
That's-
stop share. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so yeah, no, it's a nice bike. I've been pretty much all over the country on that bike, and it rides
Wow.
smooth. It's nice. So the international trucks, like I say, we have our own parts. We're able to, we have sources through various international truck dealers, and we maintain our own inventory of what makes sense. Obviously, the things that are quick turnover, the things that we don't have on inventory, we can order through them. But our technicians have all the software. Because we're a warranty dealer, we have all the same software. So one of our techs would walk up to your truck and plug into the onboard diagnostics, the same as they would if you brought it to the international vendor. And it is the points that you brought up, sir, are exactly why we are our own warranty. Because if we had to rely on that vendor, we don't have priority. We would sit there, our trucks would sit there not moving for however long it took them to get to it. Whereas for us, we can prioritize what we need, what's most critical, and make those decisions and and implement those repairs without having to rely on somebody else and what they have for availability for appointments or things like that. So that is why we do have that. And we, like I say, have all the exact same software. As a matter of fact, we just made a major investment in getting new tough books for our technicians and mechanics because we had a limited number of laptops that we could do that. And now any of our technicians can respond beside the road or wherever vehicles broke down, plug in and do on-site diagnostics on the spot.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Well, thank you very much. That was a great overview. I really appreciate it. You've got a lot of, Senator Perksick, I'm sorry.
No, sorry. No, I did have another question. So just to make sure that the central garage really is just all the AOT vehicles. So other state vehicles like the ones at BGS or,
Yes, sir. That's correct. It's just what is owned by the Agency of Transportation. Obviously, our primary customer is the Highway Division, but we also do support the DMV enforcement group as well at this time.
They get all the fancy pickups with all kinds of stuff on.
Yes,
They
sir.
get all bells
Yep.
and whistles, I'll tell you. When they order a pickup, they get everything they want.
Yeah, that's another issue.
Yeah, that's another issue.
Do you ever work with the fleet manager, like the BGS fleet manager?
Yes, absolutely. So we have a group, a collaboration group, and we get together frequently. Dave Tiff from Public Safety, Harmony Wilder from BGS, and another gentleman that's from Frank Spalding, and he deals with all the fleet for like parks and those areas. So all of us that have fleets that we manage within the state get together frequently, and we've invited our partners from Buildings and General Services purchasing to some of those, because obviously any contract that we engage in becomes a statewide contract, right? That's available to all of us. So it only makes sense for us to kind of pool our resources in some areas, and in other areas it doesn't, because obviously managing like the heavy fleet we manage, some of our needs are different, but some of the needs are the same. So we're by getting them all at the table together with purchasing better understands where they can better leverage, the best deal too. So
Great, that's good to hear. And I think
Yes,
there's probably
Senator
other lessons learned that you learned just on managing a fleet that I want to make sure that you're transferring between the different agencies.
oh, absolutely.
Senator Chitman?
And we all use the M5 system, BGS and Department of Public Safety. They're all in this M5 system as well.
Superintendent Ellis, a great presentation. And I have to ask,
Thank
during non-pandemic times, do you ever allow the public or new senators to actually physically come and
Oh,
take
yes.
a tour of the place? My
Absolutely.
8-year-old
We've done tours. We used to do tours routinely. As a matter of fact, kind of pre-pandemic, we had Secretary Flynn and Chief Engineer Simmons down there to kind of highlight the technology that we have access to in terms of there's just so much evolving with fleet and fleet management and the modern vehicles, if you will, like with the after exhaust treatment systems that you need to be able to maintain. And there's so much software that goes along with that to have to do all that. So we have multiple software systems that we have to keep, not just for the International truck and the Cummins engines, but for these exhaust systems, for the after treatments, and all of the different brands that we have, whether it's Ford, GM, and different things. So we have softwares for all that. And so now they have dongles that you can plug in, and it will actually communicate with that laptop by Wi-Fi, which is convenient because a lot of the controls that you need to adjust these after exhaust systems are on the passenger side of the vehicle, but oftentimes the onboard diagnostics are on the driver's side of the vehicle. So the technician was back and forth, dozens and dozens of times trying to just troubleshoot one problem. Now you plug a dongle in, and through Wi-Fi, you've got your laptop right there on the passenger side, and you can be making adjustments and seeing the results of those adjustments as you make them. So my opinion is that these tough books that we just bought, some might see that as an extravagance. I see it as a tool they need in their hand to do their job and do it efficiently.
Well, Tammy, I can see why you're fit for that job. You do a great job of explaining, and it is an interesting place. If anybody has the opportunity to stop in, I've been there. It's very fascinating to see you can't believe all the work that goes on there. Any other questions before we move on? Thank you very much for appearing with us this morning, and we appreciate all the work you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for having me. You have a great day.
Thank you. Okay, Liz, you can, when you have the opportunity, you can move us on to Anthea, I guess, is next. We're going to talk about miscellaneous changes to vehicles and vessels.
All set.
I gotta go get my copy.
Get your copy.
No, the copy, the draft of the bill.
Oh, a copy. Oh, I said there was coffee. Okay.
I thought you said coffee too. I thought you said, "Oh, this presentation is going to need coffee." I thought
Maybe both. Maybe you need coffee and a coffee.
Yeah, there's the. She keeps us going. I'll tell you. Without this young lady, she keeps me on the straight path every year. Thank you very much. Okay, go right ahead. Whatever you got to share with us this morning, welcome and continue.
Okay. Thank you for having me. So for the record, Anthea Dexter Cooper from the Office of Legislative Counsel, and I'm going to put up on the screen a copy of the miscellaneous motor vehicle bill draft that you have, just in case you don't have a printout in front of you. And I'm going to put it down here.
I know Jane reads all this. I look at the screen.
Sometimes it's nice to have both. I have a printed out copy next to me with some notes on it. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to point out, and this is more for the new members among you than the people who've been on the committee before, but the first two lines, I just have this sort of highlighted disclaimer that this draft of the miscellaneous motor vehicle bill is the proposals that are coming from the Department of Motor Vehicles, and then some modifications that we do in working with the Department of Motor Vehicles, and then just some technical corrections that Leg Counsel finds. There were probably more of them this year since we just got through the process of doing the reprint of Title 23. So you're going to see some instances where I'm suggesting that you lowercase the S in state and things like that. So you clearly don't need to do what I am suggesting, nor do you need to agree with the policy proposals that are being set forth by the Department of Motor Vehicles. So this will eventually be your committee bill, and this is just the starting point.
I'm not seeing it on the screen. Is everybody else seeing it?
Not yet.
Same here, just a black screen. It says you're started sharing your screen, but all I see is black.
Well, that is problematic. Let me try putting it back on this other monitor.
And let me know if you need help. Oh, there you go. You got it.
No, I think it's just that I switched monitors for some reason. Can you see it now?
Yep.
Yep.
Oh, great. Because seeing a black screen is worse than not seeing all of your faces. Okay, so with that, you can now see on those.
Yeah, before we get started, this is a bill for everyone. This is a bill that is introduced by our committee, but it is a motor vehicle department's proposal, right? So this is something, we're not endorsing it at this time. It's just a proposal that we do what we want with the bill.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you. Okay, yeah.
Okay, so the first policy proposal that you're getting from the Department of Motor Vehicles, and I'm going to mention a few instances where something is proposed to become effective at a date that isn't July 1 of 2021. So this first one is proposed to be effective retroactively on September 8th of 2020. And that's a very specific date because this section and the next section, section 2, which go together, have to do with the Department of Motor Vehicles rolling out the allowance for people to get a temporary registration at home that they then print out on their home printer, and then how that gets displayed. So when you're looking at section 1 and section 2, remember that these are going to be retroactive effective dates. So it would be making law that would exist at present, even though the bill won't go into effect until it is enacted. So in section 511, which deals with manner of display, adding some subsection headings. So for those of you who are new, if you ever see a sentence or a short phrase that seems like it's not really a sentence directing or creating law so much as just giving you a heads up about what the subsection is about, we call that a subsection heading. I added some in here just because there's now a lot going on in this section. None of this is a substantive change to the language. Where you're getting your substantive change is down on page 3 with the addition of subsection E starting on line 10. And this is saying that for a motor vehicle that is issued a temporary or in-transit registration plate under these specific sections, or those are the ones that allow the issuance of a temporary credential, that it can be displayed, and then there's criteria for how it's displayed. So it needs to be displayed horizontally, can't be flipped vertically. It needs to be displayed in a conspicuous place on the rear of the vehicle. And that includes, and this is a key part for the printing at home part, that it can be displayed in the rear window. So it could be inside the vehicle, provided that it's on the back in the rear window. And that it needs to be kept entirely unobscured, and the numerals and the letters on that temporary plate need to be visible at all times. So those are the key things that need to be met if you're going to display one of these temporary plates. It does not prohibit, for the ones that are on the like thicker cardstock, the display of it on the rear of the vehicle where a license plate would normally be seen. So that's section 1.
I have a question on that.
Yes, Senator Perkins.
I don't know if it's better to wait to let Anthony to go through the whole bill. And maybe my question is more a question for DMV, but do you want me to do it now?
No, I think now do it. It's a lot easier than going back. I think it's anyone has a question as we go, because it's going to be a lengthy bill. And I just want to make sure that we catch things as we're going along.
And going forward, I'll just pause after each section.
Sure, that'd be great. Thank you.
So my question, and maybe the commissioner, who I think I saw is here, could weigh in, but I seem to see more often temporary plates that are handwritten. Like somebody just writes on a piece of cardboard and duct tapes it to their window. I saw like 3 not too recently where it said, Vermont temporary plate, and it has a number. And so they're not printing it out. They're just getting it. Is that, I guess the question is, does this section deal with that? And is that, why are people doing that and not getting plates? You know what I mean?
So I have not had an opportunity. So for the record, Wanda Manoli, Commissioner of DMV, and Director Smith is also here, who may have a different insight than I do. I have not seen those. There is a possibility that individuals register these vehicles using their phone and don't have access to a printer. And so they're creating their own. I will let the committee know that if you use the online temporary in-transit system, you're only allowed one time to do that. So you cannot go back with the same VIN number in the car and re-register it because you didn't make an appointment with DMV or mail in your information. So not seeing those, I have to make that as an assumption, Senator. Mike, do you have any other thoughts on that?
Excuse me, Michael Smith, Director of Operations for the Department of Motor Vehicles. I too have not seen that yet, but I don't doubt it, clearly, and I think the commissioner hit it right on with some people may be doing it from their phone, but when I look at the language, it does state specifically temporary registration to be printed by the owner of the motor vehicle. So I wonder if there isn't a,
They're hand printing it. They're
yes, yeah, you know, but I'm wondering if we could,
Senator Prochuk, I would advise you to stop doing that, okay?
I'll take a picture and send
Okay.
it to Mike and
And
no, I trust me, I believe you. You know, I wonder if there isn't an opportunity to just kind of modify the language that's on the website to really, you know, put the customer on notice that, you know, you can't just make it out of cardboard, you need to print it.
yeah,
And
maybe they just didn't
Senator
have a
Perch-
printer.
Senator
It's
Perchlock,
probably
I've seen the
what it
same thing, but it seemed to be earlier in the year. I haven't seen one recently, but I had seen them earlier in the year as well.
was. Yeah, I thought it was because of COVID too. When I knew you were so backed up, they were waiting for the plates, but that doesn't. They should still have a temporary plate. So.
Okay,
And so my other assumption I'll just share with the committee is I think some of these individuals that are doing it will have their document on their phone. So it is printed. I will tell you that the number, the temporary in transit is traceable. If law enforcement for any reason stops that vehicle or questions it, that information and that temporary assignment to that vehicle and the individual will be in our system.
okay. All right, Anthea, go right ahead.
I see another member from the team from the DMV raising his hand.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't see it. Who would like to comment?
Director Tony Fakis, Enforcement and Safety.
Yep.
I just want to, just add to that. We have handled 2 requests where somebody, again, had it from a phone. They weren't able to print. One was for a boat trailer and the other was for a vehicle. And we were able to very quickly here run that. And we actually sent them just a PDF of that. So just to help facilitate that, but it's only been 2 since this whole program has been in operation that our shop has handled.
Good catch, Senator Perchlik, good catch. Okay. Go right ahead.
Sure. So just one thing I will mention before we move on from section 1, because it relates to the discussion you were just having. This display of the temporary permit language applies to a credential that is printed under section 518 or that is made available under section 518, which is this temporary permit that we're talking about. And the language that Mike was talking about in section 518, when it says to be printed by the owner, we certainly could clarify that printed does not mean hand printed. We could say to be printed from a computer printer or something like that, in addition to whatever the DMV does on its end to make that more clear on the website.
Well, why don't we flag that now, and we always can, it's a thought for the future, okay?
Okay. So within section 2, for those of you who were on the committee last year, you'll remember that pre-COVID, there was a discussion about whether or not for trying to solve the problem of people who are buying a vehicle on the weekend and the DMV is closed, they're not buying it from a dealer, they might be tempted to take the plate off of the vehicle they own and just stick it on this other vehicle to avoid getting pulled over in the interim before they're able to go into the DMV to get their actual registration plate. The idea was to make a credential that would be available through the Department of Motor Vehicles website. Nothing would be printed out. You would just display it on your phone. And that idea became section 518. But with everything that happened with COVID and the Department of Motor Vehicles shutting down their in-person operations, the Department of Motor Vehicles has since pivoted away from that idea and is doing this printed home license plate that lasts longer and alleviates the need for people to come into the department. So you see in section 2, which is amending section 518, a lot of striking out and changing around the language. An option would be to make a new section 518A or 519 instead of changing language that exists that has never really gone into effect because the Department of Motor Vehicles didn't make the credential available. But I think because it didn't go into effect and this is sort of instead of, it makes sense to amend the existing law that you created last year. But I can certainly see how you're seeing a lot of crossing out And I'm talking about this new idea that's changing this old idea that never actually became something that was brought into fruition, but that's a little bit of background with the language. But the key thing, and I think we've sort of toed around this in our conversations thus far, is that this is giving the Department of Motor Vehicles the ability to electronically issue for printing at home a temporary registration. And it will last for 60 days. You'll see that on line 7. It's up from 10 days that was contemplated with this one that you would just display on your phone. It's only available in the instances of people who are buying a vehicle from someone who's not a dealer. So that's not changing the temporary plates that are issued by a dealer, but it could be that this printing and displaying in a vehicle is an idea that is expanded to dealers at some point, but this language does not do that. And then we're getting to the process behind getting one of these temporary plates. And this is pretty similar to the process that was going to be in place for the one that was just going to be displayable on your phone. You need to make an application under oath. You have that language starting on line 10 on a form that the commissioner makes available. In this case, it's an online questionnaire that you fill out. It needs to require the applicant to attest to compliance with the provisions of Section 800. Those are the motor vehicle insurance requirements. And they need to provide any other identity, proof of identity of the vehicle that the commissioner could reasonably require. That's sort of a new addition. The fee is staying at $6, which was what the one that was going to show on your phone was going to be. And then in subsection C, you're seeing that we're striking out an entire block of language. And you can tell by the subsection heading that's being eliminated that this was really getting at what the operator needed to carry with them when they were using the vehicle. And I think that this was something that was of more concern when there were going to be vehicles driving around that didn't have a plate at all on the rear, maybe leading to law enforcement saying, well, that's odd, and pulling the vehicle over. And it was going to require that the operator have the valid bill of sale for the vehicle. It's my understanding that that will, for at least a portion of the 60 days, not necessarily be possible because the applicant needs to mail in that information to the Department of Motor Vehicles to process the registration. So that certainly would need to come out. Needing to have proof of compliance with the provisions of Section 800. Section 800, the insurance requirements, that's going to apply if the vehicle is being operated on the road. So this was definitely a belts and suspenders approach. All operators, whether they're using this temporary 60-day plate or they have a vehicle that's got a metal plate on it, they are required to have proof of insurance with them when they're operating the vehicle. So this language is probably not necessary, but was put in there to be extra clear that you needed to have proof of insurance. There was a notwithstanding of Section 511, and this was because, as we talked about with 511, that's the whole display of plates. There wasn't going to be a plate displayed at all, so you needed to ignore the display language. But now, because you're amending Section 511, if you go forward with Section 1 to say that you can have this display in the rear window, there's no need to notwithstand anything at all. And then the last part of subsection C that's getting repealed is language that you'll see a lot in Title 23 anytime something can be displayed on someone's handheld device. So you'll see it in Section 800 because we allow people to show proof of insurance on their phone, that just because you prove something to an enforcement officer by showing them your phone, it does not give the enforcement officer the authority or the power to access anything else on the device. And that is not necessary here because we're requiring the credential to be displayed on the vehicle. So that's why all of subsection C is struck out. And I'm really just drawing your attention to it because it looks like a lot of really great things that you would want an operator to be doing or to have a protection for an operator. And it's really not as applicable given this new credential. And I'm going to pause here because we're at the end of this sort of pair of sections. And I'll actually stop the share briefly so you can see each other.
Okay, no questions? All right, I guess we can move on.
Okay. This is going to be the start of the many instances of seeing the word accident crossed out and changed to crash. So one of the things that's being done with this bill either in individual sections like this, and there's always a reason why it's an individual section, or in this one blanket section at the end of the bill, is all but, and I'll explain the two that are not getting changed, all of the times that the word accident appears in Title 23 is getting changed to crash. So you'll be seeing that a ton. The first instance is on line 12 and line 17. And the reason why this section is a standalone section has to do with some cleanup language that Legislative Council is suggesting based on our process over the summer in cleaning up the statutes. So in subdivision 3, starting on line 8, you'll see that it's talking about something that needed to happen within 1 month of July 1 of 1998. That probably at some point was within 1 month of the effective date of this act. And then we changed it to say an actual date because it's confusing if you see effective date of this act and then you need to somehow figure out when the act became effective to understand the law. But now, since 1 month of July of 1998 has come and gone by decades, we can rework this section to be a little bit easier to understand and not so there's this bifurcated thing. Something needed to happen within 1 month of a date and then within 1 month of employment, because now it's just going to be going forward 1 month of employment. There also is a such in here that probably is a little bit ambiguous. So trying to clarify what such healthcare provider is. So what this subdivision is going to read as is conduct an educational and training program within 1 month of employment for all healthcare providers who work at the healthcare facility who may provide healthcare to an individual as a result of a motor vehicle crash. So not a substantive change, just cleaning up the language to make it a little bit easier to read.
Chair Mazza,
Yes.
why is that such a problem? I don't speak lawyer, and so I would love to know why that such was a pause for you. What is the interpretable, how can that be interpreted in different ways?
It's just when you read it, it's sort of a, well, which healthcare provider? What does that such refer to? Trying to make it so you can read the sentence without necessarily needing to look at what the rest of the language provides. And where you're getting that language that I have duplicated instead of the such is actually from the section above, where it says healthcare providers who work in the healthcare facility who may provide healthcare to a person as a result of a motor vehicle crash. So maybe we're being a little bit duplicative and redundant in the language, but the idea is if you were just referring to, the educational training piece and you're going to say, oh, that's subdivision, and I have forgotten what subsection is. Oh, that's subdivision G3, and then you read G3 in a vacuum, you're a little bit lost. But if you want to keep the such, it's totally okay. It's not changing the meaning at all. And I think this is an effort for us to try and be less lawyerly. And you'll see in some instances we're taking out some legalese language, forthwith we're changing to immediately to try and make it so that, everyone can hopefully understand the statutes, even when they are pretty complicated.
As a quick follow-up, I already asked a lot of questions of this via email, and I want to thank you, Anthea, for responding so thoroughly. So great work, and I really appreciate having your expertise looking at this.
You're very welcome. Okay, so I'm going to move on to section 4. This is another instance where you've got some changes from accident to crash, but this one's sort of interesting because in the blanket definitions that apply to all of Title 23 and 23 Section 4, commissioner always refers to commissioner of motor vehicles, except in the chapter on enforcement officers. And I'm going to pull up that definition. So in, I'm in the wrong place, sorry. In 23 VSA Section 1600, unlike the rest of Title 23, the definition of commissioner, so it's notwithstanding the definition section in subdivision 4, commissioner means the commissioner of public safety. And this was added in 2015, probably in an effort to make language in the rest of the chapter more clear, because all of those commissioners were referring to the commissioner of public safety. In looking at this language over the summer and in consulting with the DMV and in consulting with the Department of Public Service through the Department of Motor Vehicles, it turns out that one of the commissioners in this section was actually supposed to refer to the Commissioner of Motor Vehicles. So to be clear, what commissioner is being referred to in which instance, adding in of public safety at line 16, saying what the Commissioner of Public Safety needs to do, and then at line 5, saying what it is that the Commissioner of Motor Vehicles needs to do. And I am going to change this forthwith because it's weird that I am suggesting that you change one forthwith to immediately on line 16 and not doing the same on line 4. So if we're gonna get rid of legalese, we might as well get rid of it in the same way in the same section. So I will flag that, but this is not meant to be a substantive change, just adding clarity to which commissioner is which in this section. Okay, I will move on. This is another one that's a bit, that is not coming from Ledge Council. This is actually a policy shift, and this is the other section to note that it is effective retroactively. This is going to be effective retroactively to April 1st of 2020. And this is changing the requirement that has the commissioner need to inspect and find in conformance the description given in the application for purposes of getting a certificate of title. And it is my understanding that this is not something that the Department of Motor Vehicles thinks is necessary, and this change in practice was prompted by COVID and social distancing and fewer in-person services. And I think they can talk to the implementation of this, but this would have retroactive applicability to April of last year. Okay, I will move on to the next section. This is another one that's coming from Legislative Council. It's talking about the calibration of tank vehicles. And it says that the calibration of tank vehicles shall be done under the supervision of the Director of Weights and Measures. Vermont doesn't actually have a Director of Weights and Measures. Instead, Ledge Council is suggesting changing that to the Secretary of Agriculture, Food and Markets, which would then cover whoever is responsible for the calibration certification under the Secretary. But that is not intended to be a substantive change. We just don't have a Director of Weights and Measures. Okay, another one that is coming from Ledge Council. In the section on lien filing fees, it's saying that it's the fees are specified in subdivision 1671A6 or 1671C of this title. Those sections don't actually exist in Title 23. They exist in Title 32. This was probably just an error that wasn't caught, or it was something that someone was a little enthusiastic of changing something to of this title when it shouldn't have been. And you'll see that the language and the citations are actually correct in the lien filing fees in other parts of statute. And you'll see in section 3031, it's 32 VSA section 1671A6 or 1671C. So just a technical correction that we caught over the summer. Okay, moving on to a different form of transportation. We are now going to talk about snowmobiles. So a couple of things are happening here in terms of trying to clean up language when using the word muffler device, an exhaust system, and a muffler device being part of an exhaust system. I have asked the Department of Motor Vehicles to confirm that I'm using muffler and exhaust correctly in here. They have not told me otherwise, but if someone who knows more about how exhaust systems work and snowmobiles, hopefully they will confirm if any of this is incorrect. But the policy proposal change here is instead of linking the noise level requirements to post September 1, 1972, 82 decibels on the A scale at 50 feet. And I actually learned that that comes from the Code of Federal Regulations for snowmobiles in certain federal lands. So it's not something that Vermont picked out of the abstract, but instead that the snowmobiles that are manufactured after February 1 of 2007 needs to display a visible and unaltered marking of SSCC certified, issued by the Snowmobile Safety and Certification Committee. One of the things that I'm going to point out with the lead-in language of subsection D into subdivisions 1 and 2 is you have a not in subsection D in the lead-in language, and you have a not in subdivision 1. So you're going to get a double negative here. So the snowmobiles that are manufactured after February 1, 2007 need to do this. You get your double negative. And the reason why is because you want subdivision 2 to actually have that negative lead-in language. You cannot operate a snowmobile regardless of the date of manufacture with an exhaust system that is modified in a manner that amplifies or otherwise increases total noise emission above that of the snowmobile as originally constructed. So while I would love it if there wasn't a double negative in there, it is there for a reason so that subdivision 2 makes sense. Then for purposes of sales, it's linking the prohibition on sales to compliance with subsection D. So linking the sections a little bit more. The other changes that you're getting in this language are some more of that muffler as part of an exhaust system, and then getting rid of some subdivision headings. And I know I was in some instances adding subsection headings. We don't use subdivision headings or subsection headings unless it's used throughout. And you'll see that there isn't one in subdivisions 1 or subdivisions 2. But the policy change, setting aside all of the stuff that I like to do with cleaning up the language, is shifting away from that decibel threshold to the display of the certification.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, madam.
Yes, as you know, I am the Senate appointee to the governor's
Snowmobile, that's right. You're the
Council.
expert of snowmobiles, right?
Yes, and this legislation and change on the noise related to noise is one that the council has discussed and does support to get this language updated and to use this new standard
That's why we put you on there, because you protect them. That's why you did a good job. Thank you.
Well, you know, I don't know. It seems like this is a different topic, but there are motorcycles that are so loud they actually hurt your ears to listen to them. And I know that people have the same
For cars too, for some cars too.
Yeah.
I've got our police department must have had 6 or 7 complaints this year because cars are going around a curve down here by somebody's, and they back off and they hit the exhaust, again, and it just blows out of their mind. And so I don't know. That's another. I don't know how we're going to handle that one.
Truck engine brakes are a problem in South Burlington too.
They are. Yeah.
Oh, Jake brakes.
Yeah, Jake brakes.
Yeah. So I just wanted to let the committee know that this language has been discussed at the council and supported as a language that's needed to that is up to date and addresses the issue around the noise emission.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Senator Perchlik.
Maybe there's a question for our snowmobile expert.
Electric snowmobiles. There we go.
Yeah, well, they do make them.
Yeah.
And
they're fast.
They're even faster. I think the governor's going to go back to wanting to race.
You can't even buy a snow machine this year. I heard they're impossible to buy because there's thousands of shortages because everybody bought them. Okay, your question. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, one of the questions for Anthea, and that is there anywhere else in our statutes where we talked about the decibels? Because I had the same question about motorcycles, but was it only snowmobiles that we ever listed in statute a decibel limit?
So that same 82 decibels on the A scale is also applicable for boats. And then my recollection is I don't think we have anything for ATVs or other motor vehicles. There have been bills introduced in the past that would have applied to motor vehicles, but I think in statute at present, it is just snowmobiles and boats. And it's that same 82 decibels.
Senator Perchlik, the reason because motorcyclists wear a helmet and they can't hear that noise. So that's just one of the things you might want to consider in your legislation.
Well, right. If they're not wearing a helmet, then they'll want a quieter bike.
Okay. Well, okay. We'll put that into language. Okay.
The question is, and for maybe for Senator Kitchell or the DMV that suggested this language is what the problem was. It seems like just cleaning up the language, but was it a problem like we were trying to have to figure out what the decibels of these vehicles were? And is that SSCC certification, does it include something about the noise? Or are we just saying, we're just assuming that anything that's certified is going to be quiet and we just want to avoid people, like taking the muffler off because they like it loud?
Maybe Mike Smith has got to answer that, but I believe that it's a clearly identifiable way of assuring compliance with the standard. And I have always assumed that that this certified would have standards underneath it to get the certification, but Mike probably ought to confirm that if he can.
Senator Kitchell, I think you nailed it. This is something that's come up in the committee a few times, and my recollection from the law enforcement side of the committee is not all of the officers have access to a decibel meter, so they're unable to measure it. So other than saying, "Gosh, it sounded loud," right? So, and if you go with the standard that the snowmobiles come with, then that, as Senator Kitchell pointed out, has the information below it where the level is what it is. So it's not modified. So if that made any sense.
But Mike, do you know that if the SSCC has a noise component to it?
I do not. I'm assuming it probably does because this is language that the council put forward to try and address the super loud snowmobiles and people modifying them. So
we can get confirmation from VAST that in fact the certification under that certification has what the standard is to achieve certification.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see what it includes, just so we know. Or I'm interested, at least, if somebody could just point me to where I can look it up.
No, I think probably the easiest thing is for Mike to shoot Cindy Locke a email asking if they can tell us what standard is used to warrant to meet the certification requirements.
It seems like an opportunity for the committee to talk about the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, again.
I know. And I was thinking maybe that's certainly our former pro tem. Because he actually visited the NIST facility in Colorado.
Right. His ears are ringing, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Anthea, go ahead.
Okay, we are now going to talk about boats for a very long time, approximately 25 pages. So a lot of what's happening in this language, and I worked on this with the Department of Motor Vehicles and the Vermont State Police, and the Vermont State Police worked on it with the US Coast Guard, which was sort of the impetus behind getting some of this language updated to be more in compliance with federal law, but then also to do less referring to federal law so that it was hopefully easier to understand by looking at the statutes. One of the things I'm going to say at the outset is I don't know very much about boats. There are a lot of people who know a lot more about boats, and there are a lot of people who know more about how this information in statute and the laws are then actually translated into what information is disseminated in a hopefully easy to understand form to people who use boats. So I think that there are going to be a lot of questions where I can tell you where language came from in linking it back to the Code of Federal Regulations and sort of the thought process behind some of the way that it's drafted, but for how it's actually going to be understood by boaters, probably something that the committee is going to want to hear from other people on. So that's my little, I don't know much about boats disclaimer at the beginning.
Well, I have a whole bunch of boat dealers in my area. Naturally, I'm surrounded by them. So maybe they'll want to look at this. I'll give them the language or something, and they can, because I don't have a boat, but we'll have to run it by them. Okay, go ahead.
So you'll see throughout a lot of motorboats being changed to vessels. This is an attempt to be consistent in the language. All scattered throughout this chapter, there would sometimes be a random usage of the word ship, but we never defined what ship was. So trying to be consistent with vessel being the more broad definition, motorboat being those motorized vessels, not using the phrase motorized vessel, avoiding the word boat, which then is that a motorboat or is it a vessel? So trying to be clear in the language in terms of what types of vessels we're actually describing. In the definition section, you're going to see a lot of new definitions. Almost all of them have to do with lights, and those are all coming from the Code of Federal Regulations. And I will mention a citation as we go through it, but if you want more information about that language or you want me to pull the language and actually send it to you, I certainly can do that. So the definition for all around light, that is verbatim pulled from 33 CFR section 83.21. And you will see all around light used when we get to section 3306 and talk about the lighting requirements. The next couple of changes you're going to see on lines 17 and 18, these are drafting manual changes to use more of an active voice. Masthead light, this is another one that comes from the Code of Federal Regulations, that same section, 83.21. You're going to see masthead light in section 3306 when we talk about lighting requirements. This is one of the instances where we're trying to be more succinct in our definition of motorboat, saying that it's a vessel equipped with machinery capable of propelling the vessel, whether or not such machinery is the principal source of propulsion. And part of this is you'll see we talk about sailing vessels with an auxiliary motor. This would still cover those types of vessels under motorboat. For purposes of this, but shall not include a vessel that has a valid marine document issued by U.S. Customs and Border Protection or any successor federal agency. That was language that was necessary for certain exemptions related to motorboats, having to do with fees that are paid and the numbering that's required on the boat. So those are addressed in those sections, which we'll get to later on, 3305 and 3307. But this is having a more blanket definition of motorboat that can be used throughout. So that's why this exemption is taken out, but it's still applicable in the instances where it was supposed to be applicable. We've got some motorboats changing to vessels on lines 15 and 16. I'm pointing this out on lines 20 and 21, even though it is not a change in the statute. Person, even though I would say that person describes a human being person, in our statute, we have statutes in general and specifically in this one, person has a much broader definition. It includes individual, partnership, firm, corporation, association, or other entity. So trying to be more clear in language when it's talking about a human being, using the word individual throughout. So you're going to see a lot of changes there. The example I'm going to use, because it comes up in the very next page, for a personal watercraft, which I now know, I think is a very complicated way of describing a jet ski. You certainly couldn't have a person, a corporation operating, sitting on a jet ski. So this is an instance to use the word individual. So you'll see a lot of cleanup where we're trying to be more consistent in using individual to talk about a human being. The next addition you're going to get is sailing vessel. So when a vessel is in sailing mode, it's a vessel under sail, provided that propelling machinery, if fitted, is not being used, to distinguish between the sailing vessel that has the auxiliary motor that's being used or not being used. That also comes from the Code of Federal Regulations. That's from 33 CFR 83.03. Side lights, another one of those definitions that's coming from the Code of Federal Regulations that you need for purposes of your lighting requirements. And that's got a very, very complicated definition that is verbatim from statute. Same with stern light. No change to the vessel definition. This is your big broad bucket for boats. We've got a person to individual change. And then that is it in terms of the definitions. So I'm going to pause for a second, but you'll see these definitions are used throughout, and that's why they're included in this section in the beginning.
Senator Mazza,
Yes.
this is Commissioner Manoli. I would just like to share with the committee, as Anthea goes through this language was presented to us by Sergeant Carbo of the Marine Division with the Vermont State Police. And this is language that we were preparing to discuss last year before COVID hit and we shut down the legislature or moved to a new method of communicating with the legislature. So I just want the committee to be aware he is the expert in this proposed language. And while we are available to try to answer any questions, DMV will really not be able to get into the specifics of why this language is needed. And I would encourage the committee to have a conversation with Sergeant Carbo.
Did you know if he had any communication with any dealers or the people of that would be my concern, is that they're not surprised by, because like I said, there's, I don't know how many dealers in my area all the way up the islands. And I just would, if they had any input, that's my question.
I can't speak for Sergeant Carbo. I do know that some of this language is coming from the federal side, and so he is your expert.
Probably Liz would take a note, Liz, and we'll probably have some questions.
I will send her his contact information.
Good.
And Chair Mazza,
Go ahead.
as a very avid boater and spending as much time as I can on the lake, which isn't enough. The language is very clear, very self-explanatory to me.
All right, good. Yeah, as long as, like I said, unless you're into this, you don't understand what it's all about. And people that are in the boating business certainly would understand it. Okay, go ahead.
I would just like to say it's a huge relief that it makes sense to someone who understands boats. So
Yeah, that's right. Because all I know is they float on the water, so that's good.
okay, I will put my share screen back up. We could keep talking about boats. Okay. Section 12, this has to do with the numbering of boats. This is a technical fix in the citations that are referenced for the exemptions from numbering. One of it is just a subdivision hadn't been included. It went up to subdivision 5. And then the subdivision 6 addition is the exemption for the part that we carved out of the motorboat piece. We now have our, I can pause there, but I think that one was a little more straightforward than some of the others. Okay. Section 13, this deals with fees. This is where we're adding in that exemption that we carved out from motorboats, having a valid marine document issued by the U.S. Customs and Border Protection or any successor federal agency. Nothing is changing with the fees. And that is the majority of the changes you're getting here. You've got a lot of vessel to motorboat changes. Makes sense, less than 10 horsepower, dealing with a motorized vehicle. And that is going to be it for purposes of the fee language. We'll pause here.
Okay, any questions or at this point? Okay. Senator Pertzik, I don't hear anything about electric boat in here, so I'm, have any issue, any questions?
Senator Pertzik will be happy to know that we will have one giving tours up on the lake, on Lake Memphremagog this summer. So he's more than welcome to come up. I will
Really, electric boat?
Yep, I'll arrange the tour for him and he will be very happy.
Now, is it a
Wow,
pon-
I didn't know that action too.
is it a pontoon boat?
It is not a pontoon boat. It's more of a little bit of a tour boat, but it's not a pontoon. It's a fixed hull.
Wow.
All right. Yeah, that'd be great.
Thank you. Yeah.
No, I know that there's electric, you can, for your, outboard motor, you can buy electric versions.
So Senator Ingalls, will you serve lunch on your boat tour?
Well, I won't, but I will take you to a good place that does serve lunch and I'll pick the
Well,
tab up.
I heard Senator Ingalls just bought a big boat, half the size of the lake. How many feet?
I'll just 25, 26, so that
Wow.
250 horsepower Suzuki, but it's not electric. But
Oh.
I will give rides on that as well. So
Wow. Look at that. There we go. We got an invite.
yep.
Senator
Okay.
Mazza.
Yes, go right ahead.
I'm glad, Senator Ingles, that you have boating experience, because one comment I made to Anthea was that I don't. And so as I was reading this legislation, I was just wondering how the committee takes in expert testimony, but it sounds like that's already been considered. So I appreciate that. And I really do appreciate, Anthea, you giving me all those thorough responses. So thanks for giving them to me in advance.
And I will echo what Commissioner Manoli said. Sergeant Carbo was my main point of contact on the language and the liaison to make sure that the federal stuff was being complied with and they were approving of the language as it was written. Certainly, you could, change the language around, but he was the
No,
person.
we don't want to mess with it unless, unless we have a reason. Like I said, as long as everybody understands it, not everybody, but the people on the water, I have no issue with it. It's just, it's great. Okay, go right ahead.
Okay, so continuing on, this next section has just a bit of cleanup from the editors and trying to conform better with how we draft statutes. You'll see the addition of an A. You'll see some persons to individuals, a change from under the age of 12 to 12 years of age. And that is going to be it until we get down to subdivision B2 for boating safety education rules. Not a substantive change, just dealing with some awkward sentence structure. Again, this is a recommendation that's coming from the editors and Ledge Council to make this language just a little easier to understand, hopefully. And then we've just got some more vessel, motorboat, and individual changes here. Now we're going to get, and I will pause for a second, but I think it'll be a quick pause. We are getting to all of the light changes.
Questions, comments? Okay, Anthea, go right ahead.
Okay, so all of those definitions that were added in the beginning, the first section you worked on, most of them had to do with lights. I know that we said we were attempting to have fewer references to the Code of Federal Regulations. This one is just for purposes of the intensity, but then throughout, instead of saying, a side light is defined in Code of Federal Regulations, and then you need to look in the Code of Federal Regulations, including that in here. I can tell you that this language, as for what unpowered vessels need to have and sailing vessels and motorized vessels, all that language comes from 33 CFR section 83.25 and section 83.23. So this was really just me copying verbatim from what the CFR says, and hopefully it makes sense to people who are actually needing to make sure their boats have the right lights.
And we talk about the red lights, blue lights. There's one here that says you got to have a red light and a blue light. Or a green light, red and green. Okay.
Okay, moving on from lights to personal flotation devices. This was just some cleanup language that the Vermont State Police through the U.S. Coast Guard were requesting. I'm on page 23 right now, making sure that it was a wearable U.S. Coast Guard approved personal flotation device that complied with federal regulations, needing to have it for each individual. It needs to be capable of being used in accordance with the U.S. Coast Guard approval label, shifting away from the type 1, 2, or 3 personal flotation devices to more of this U.S. Coast Guard approved standard, and that it needs to be used by, as intended by the manufacturer. So the manufacturer says it needs to be worn with an arm in each armhole. It doesn't mean you clip it around your waist and leave your arms free. So that's for purposes of individuals under 12 years of age. So there you go. I think probably someone who knows about boats also probably knows more about personal flotation devices and can tell you what sort of devices would be U.S. Coast Guard approved. And maybe could tell you what type 1, 2, and 3 were back when that was a standard that was more in use. I think that's it. This is a little bit of cleanup language for subsection C. And then this is where we've got our change saying now we're moving on to fire extinguishers. So I will stop share and you can talk about personal flotation devices.
Okay, anything? Senator Ingles, you all right?
And I have just a clarifying
Yes, Senator
question,
Berkeley.
more from for why I'm voting. So if you're under 12, then you have to be wearing it. And then I was always told that you just needed to have a personal flotation device in the boat for everybody else, but it doesn't seem to say that. But that may be because we didn't change that, or maybe that's.
Yeah, you're not changing it. So in subdivision B1 for personal flotation devices, each vessel except for sailboards shall consistent with federal regulations carry for each individual aboard at least one wearable U.S. Coast Guard approved personal flotation device that is in good and serviceable condition and capable of being used in accordance with the U.S. Coast Guard approval label. So carry one for each individual. And then for purposes of individuals under 12 years of age, in addition to the provisions of the subsection, so in addition to needing to have one for each individual under 12 years of age, while underway and the individual is on an open deck, shall wear a properly secured wearable U.S. Coast Guard approved personal flotation device as intended by the manufacturer. So not changing that, just cleaning up the language and linking it more to U.S. Coast Guard approval. And then for purposes of sailboards, and I'm going to need to look that up if you're going to ask me what a sailboard is.
Yeah, it's not earlier.
They need to have one if it's under 16 years of age.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Ingalls, if you have 6 people on your boat, you have 6 life preservers, and then you invite someone on, do you have extras or they have to bring their own? How does that work?
My boat will hold 13 people, and I have at least 13 life vests on there to.
Okay. But you don't go to 15 people, something like that. You wouldn't.
I don't. I really try to follow the rules of
Okay.
how many people that are on there. And so
if you get stopped, you have to match up with the Coast Guard.
they will count them up and they will fine you if you don't have them.
Okay.
For sure.
That's what
Yep.
I thought. Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Go ahead.
Okay, so moving on to fire extinguishers. So this is saying just some cleanup language, not changing the requirements with the less than 26 feet in length or the auxiliary powered sailboats. We're just being consistent in our definition usage and moving some language around to be a little easier to read. But the key change that is happening is the classes of fire extinguishers are being changed. And I don't know if it's that there has been a change in fire extinguisher classifications and 46 CFR section 2530 has changed and we just didn't change our statute, or if this was an error that we just had inadvertently. But I did look in 46 CFR section 2530, and those are the classes of extinguishers that are required under the CFR. So we are consistent with the CFR if we make these changes.
Okay.
Okay, and now I'm going to move on to marine toilets and holding tanks. This was probably just an oversight. We're saying that every marine toilet on board of any vessel shall also incorporate or be equipped with a holding tank. But then it was just saying that a holding tank designed, it needs to be designed as to provide for optional means of discharge to the waters. It really should be holding tank or marine toilet. So just adding that in, and that was a request, I think, directly from the U.S. Coast Guard through the Vermont State Police.
Okay.
Stop there. I think that gets us through all of our equipment section.
All right. No questions, right? Okay, go ahead.
Okay, moving on to numbering. This is some cleanup of language, trying to be clear for purposes of what guidance you need to follow if it is an exemption for a motorboat that is owned by a state or subdivision. This language in 33 CFR section 173.19, that is a prohibition on numbering from a non-issuing entity. So you can't have multiple numbering if it's from a non-issuing entity. So some cleanup there. This came from the US Coast Guard. Some consistency in using vessel as opposed to ship and motorboat. And then the substantive change that you're getting is, I said we were pulling out that exemption from motorboat in the definition in two places, one with fees and one with numbering. This is where you're getting that second exemption piece. So a motorboat that has a valid marine document issued by U.S. Customs and Border Protection or any successor federal agency doesn't need to have a Vermont number under this chapter.
But basically, a lot of this issue is just under the federal guidelines, and it's nothing that nobody's putting into the bill. Okay. All right.
Okay, we're getting to a slight policy change in this next one. This has to do with validations of out-of-state or federal registrations, changing a boat to a motorboat to be consistent, striking out an unnecessary reference to a definition section. But then on line 10, this is where you're getting a substantive change. Ooh. So I'm highlighting too much, but instead of it saying 30, it would say 60 days. So this is for purposes of when one of these motorboats that is registered in another state or under a federally approved numbering system, or that has a valid document issued by a federal agency, and it's used on the waters of the state of Vermont. If it's more than 60 days in a calendar year, it shall apply to the Commissioner of Motor Vehicles for validation of the out-of-state or federal registration, as opposed to current law, which is 30 days. And then just some cleanup using the word owner when owner should be used and motorboat when it should be used. And then in subdivision 1, just a cleanup of an awkward phrase. It's still requiring that the form that the commissioner requires be signed by every owner of the motorboat for purposes of the application for the validation. And that is going to be it for this section. And I will stop my share.
Questions, comments? Then go right ahead.
Okay, section 17. This has to do with distance requirements, and none of the changes are intended to be substantive or policy changes. It's a lot of cleanup, a lot of persons change to individuals. A corporation is not going to be operating a vessel or swimming in the water. Using vessel when we can, as opposed to describing multiple types of vessels on line 9, but no substantive changes here, just some cleanup.
Okay, all right. No questions, go right ahead.
Okay, we've got one more that's pretty straightforward, cleanup filled, and then something that actually is a bit more substantive. In section 18, just going from motorized vessel to motorboat and vessel to motorboat, consistent with the definitions. Now in section 3312, this is something that maybe someone who actually operates a boat can provide some applicability interpretation on. But again, this is language that has to do with when motorboats are approaching each other. And all of this is coming from the CFR, 33 CFR sections 83.14, 0.15, 0.16, and 0.17. So this is consistent with federal regs.
So we have we actually are addressing two types of vessels, one motorboats and
Yep.
and then two vessels. We have motorboats specifically addressed in the first, and then B and C are two vessels. So one is broader, B and C are broader than A.
You got it. If I'm using the definitions correctly, yes, that is the intent, and that is consistent with CFR.
Okay, I think Senator Ingalls should report this section
Yes,
out.
he will. He's going to report
Yeah.
the bill. That's right. He's
Uh-huh.
a knowledgeable person. We leave you
Uh-huh.
the snow machines and because you ride
Yes.
every day. And Senator Ingalls is the person on the water. Okay. Go right
And
ahead.
then in the next one, we use watercraft.
Yep, and that is defined, I believe. Let's go check our handy definition section.
We have motorboats, we have vessels, we have watercraft.
Watercrafts, that's the jet ski. That's the complicated definition for a jet ski.
I know. Uh-huh.
Personal watercraft.
Those are popular.
Do those have, those
They're very
do have a noise?
Very noisy, very noisy. They have limitations, yeah.
We do have noise limitations for them.
I thought we did, but maybe we don't. 'cause
I think
know-
that's what Anthea said. We did for,
There is a decibel for boats, and that should, I think
I thought
that
it was addressed a few years ago because they were getting so popular and noisy that I thought that was one of the ones that was addressed.
And Thea, could you confirm that personal
Yeah.
watercraft is considered a boat if the decibel limit is on boats?
yeah, we ought to make sure that we're applying a noise standard
They can be very obnoxious, those things.
universal. They can be.
Agreed.
We had electric ones, they'd be quiet.
It's just the extension cord gets in the way of the pitch outs, you know?
Yeah, it's hard to plug them in.
It's hard to plug them in, right?
Okay. So we jumped ahead. The next section is about personal watercrafts, and this is addressing the personal flotation device requirements for personal watercrafts.
So Anthea, just to confirm, you're gonna get back to us on that?
Yep,
question?
I'll get back to you on whether or not the decibel limitation that I know exists in this chapter would apply to personal watercrafts. And it could be something that you could get law enforcement perspective on from Sergeant Carbo in terms of, if there are similar issues with, not having a decibel, a way to measure decibels out on the water, if maybe this is something where there would be a different standard beyond the 82 decibel on scale A that would maybe be more applicable, much like is now being proposed for the snowmobiles.
So jet skis actually can have more than one other than the operator?
Oh, they have some that have three
Really?
riders. Yep.
Really? Because I was looking at B, we're talking about individuals operating or riding. So obviously, you got to have room for more than one. So they're up to three, huh?
Yeah,
They move right along too. They have
they do.
They go.
Yep.
And I'm going to put up on the screen the definition of personal watercraft, which is not being changed in this language. But you'll see that it does say operated by an individual or individuals. So definitely can, under this definition, have more than one person on it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, we are now moving on to crashes in the boating world. Not a substantive change. You have a lot of accidents being changed to crash, persons being changed to individuals. Where you're getting a substantive change is currently if a collision, accident, or other casualty involving a vessel results in death or injury to a person or damage in excess of $100, then the operator needs to file with the Commissioner of Motor Vehicles within 36 hours a description that is being upped from $100 to $2,000 in property damage.
All right, go right ahead. I'm sorry. Yep.
Just a little more on boats.
Okay.
This one is just using vessel instead of boat to be more consistent with our definitions in section 20, and some changes from person to individuals throughout. So no substantive changes, just being more clear in our language usage. And then and I don't know why these two bodies of water are called out specifically in statute as opposed to being dealt with in the use of bodies of water rules from DEC, which has information about most of the bodies of water in the state. While these two are in statute, the only reason this is here is because it's using the phrase motor propelled boats and changing those to motor boats instead. So that's why this language is here. It's not a substantive change. But I can try and get some more information about why these two bodies of water are specifically called out if someone doesn't know the answer and volunteers it. But that was something that jumped out to me as just an oddity in our statutes. And that is it in boats.
Okay, a lot of boat stuff. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, sorry, I apologize. There's one more section on boats. we're almost done with boats. The last section is just dealing with the definition of motorboat for purposes of titling, which is in a different chapter in Title 23, which is the only reason that it's separate. So the word motorboat in this chapter on titling is only used twice. Once is to define motorboat, and then once is in the definition of vessel. And then vessel is used hundreds of times in the chapter. So instead of having an irrelevant definition, just combining the two definitions into one for purposes of the definition of vessel, but not changing the titling requirements in any way. And now you are done with boats.
Senator Ingalls, what's the purchase and use? You have to pay purchase and use when you buy a boat, or?
You do, and I do believe it's the same as cars. I was just, it's funny you said that. I was just thinking that since I've got mine delivered to me, that they had collected all the tax on that and they hadn't sent it back to me. But yeah, I do believe it's purchase and use, and I believe it's the same as an automobile. I
And
should
you
know
register,
that.
you have to register it with the state?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Remember we were talking the other day, they gave me an in-transit plate.
Yeah.
That the shipper put on the back and then brought it up, and then I'm supposed to be
What's
receiving
the
all the.
registration fee? Does it go according to purchase or go to length, or how's that work? You know?
Oh, I think it's length. I do
Okay.
think
Mike
there is some
Smith
length
is
on that.
raising his hand. I think
Yeah,
he
Okay,
thank
knows.
you.
Mike, yeah. Mike, what is the registration?
The registration is based on length. And so there's, I think, 4 different categories. Excuse me. Tax on boats is actually a sales tax. So it's collected by DMV, but then it ends up going to the tax department. Tax on your trailer is purchase and use. So
Right,
that would be taxed by the-
Okay. But the registration fee is based on the footage,
Yep, the length of the boat, yes.
so much a foot.
Well, I don't think it's broken down by that. I think it's up to 16 feet is one fee, and then I think it's 17 to 26, and there's 4 categories.
All right. Okay.
So Mike, if you have a sailboat,
Mhm.
say I got a 50-foot sailboat.
Mhm.
It still, you would register a non-motorized
Well-
vessel?
If it doesn't have a motor, it doesn't have to be registered. Most of your sailboats have a motor of some
Yeah.
sort to get it
Yeah.
into the dock and stuff, and that's when it has to be registered.
Okay, and that would still, the registration on that would be based on footage as well.
Yep, absolutely.
I don't ever remember discussing that for fees. It hasn't been must have been a long time ago. But the fees,
Yep, that was all those fees were adjusted in the last fee bill.
oh, they were, okay.
Yes. Yeah, because we touched every fee the department has.
Jane, is there any way you could buy your son a boat and we could put it over here in this area? We'd spend some money down here and just,
You know, he bought a boat, a
okay.
used boat.
Oh, that's
um,
dangerous right there.
Is it a
From
boat or a
somewhere-
vessel?
a vessel, a motorboat. And he was going to take it to Rhode Island and use it in Narragansett Bay to, I don't know, fish. Needless to say, the boat's in the barn.
I do have
Yes, go right ahead, Senator Perchlik, go ahead.
And Thea, the parts in the statute, I know those weren't substantial change, but would there certain ponds and certain waters where motor boats aren't allowed? At one point, well, I guess, why is that? Is that just at certain times legislature or like Parks and Recs have said, let's ban this, it has to be specifically in the statute? There's not just like a standard rule about, bodies of water of a certain size shouldn't have motorboats or something?
So it has to do with, and I can send you the link to the rules, and it's like an 100-page document, and the first 14 pages are rules, but then the rest of it is Appendix A, which has information about lots of bodies of water in the state of Vermont. And the general rule has to do with going more than 5 miles per hour, and then sometimes there are instances where one with a motor is prohibited. And for some reason, and maybe it's just how the rules were established, it has to do with what was a normal use on, I want to say, January 1 of 1993. So I think a lot of it is historic, and that was done through rulemaking within the DEC. So I can send you those rules, but it is actually pretty cool because I live on a very, very small lake, and I was able to look up my lake in that appendix and see, that I could actually land a seaplane on it if I, knew how to fly a seaplane, but only for, a particular portion of the year. So I will send that to you when we're done.
Any other questions or
Yeah,
comments?
you can send it to Senator Perchlik. I'm not gonna read the 100 and some odd.
No, that's his. Yeah, right. Yeah. Anything else? Anybody got any questions? I guess this is primarily a vessels bill or boat bill.
There are a few more sections to get through.
Okay, go ahead. All right.
But we made it through the 25 pages of vessel language.
All right. Okay.
Okay, the next one that you have is going to deal with replacing accident with crash throughout Title 23. So I know we've seen this a little bit, but for sections where the only change was going to be going from accident to crash or accidents to crashes or an accident to a crash.
That's our new spin now, crashes, no more accidents.
Don't use that word. This is giving the Office of Legislative Counsel, when we go through over the summer to update the statutes, this is giving us the authority to make these 3 changes throughout these specific sections. And I went through, and the Department of Motor Vehicles went through, and we have now, in this language and the language in this draft, changed all of the accidents to crashes in its different iterations, and except for 2 instances. One of them, you're actually going to see in some language that I'm going to put up, because there are 3 new sections to the miscellaneous motor vehicle bill. And then the only one that is not being changed is in 23 VSA section 3905 and the driver license compact. It uses the word accident. And since compacts are things that states enter into, and it's important that they agree to the language, I didn't feel comfortable sort of advising you to make that accident to crash change in that one section. So just calling that out for you, that there will still be 1 accident in Title 23.
So Anthea, I just want to be clear on the replacement language allowing you to replace accident. Those are sections in addition to the ones we've already changed here in this bill.
Correct. And there are a few more that we're going to get to in sections, I think 24, 25, and 26. The reason why I lumped these all into one bucket was twofold. Either it was the only change that was going to be made in the section, so including it would have made this bill much longer than it needed to be. And the ones that we're about to get to, doing a straight change from accident to crash, would have been awkward phrasing, and I didn't want you to give me the authority to make that change and then I do exactly what you say. And I'll pull up the next example. In section 24, if I changed accident to crash, it would say certified copy of an individual crash report. So avoiding, inadvertently making it so that if we follow the intent in session law to the T, we're making our statutes make less sense.
Okay. It's like cleaning your closet. It's painful.
But rewarding.
From the perspective of having just gone through Title 23, so the green books that you see in the State House when you're actually there, every year we reprint 4 of them, and they don't have this like thick supplement at the end or this pocket part that you need to have in addition to the green book. And we just updated Title 23 over the summer. So I wish we could go back in time by 1 year and make all these accident crash changes so that they were then in the green book and you didn't have to look to the supplement at the back. But in this day and age, with everyone looking at the statutes online, it's not as big of a deal. So sticking with accident and crash, in addition to that blanket language, these are the instances where doing a straight swap would have been odd. So you've got an accident just being deleted in both subdivision 7 and 8. Those are for purposes of the public records request fees. Replacing traffic accident with crash in section 25. In section 26, it's another traffic accident to crash change. And then that gets us to capitalization. So I will stop here. Any questions on accident and crash?
No, I guess not. Go right ahead.
I think next year we need to change it to wreck.
Right.
Well, Well, at least I know where all of them are now, so it would be easier to find.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so jumping gears, when we use the word state in statute and it's capitalized, it means the state of Vermont. And one of the things that happens during Stat Rev is a lot of times the word state is capitalized just because there used to be very little capitalization in the statutes. Agency of Transportation used to be all lowercase, and you'll see that in Title 19, and it looks very odd because now we're used to having proper nouns capitalized in our statutes. And I think probably what happened here was just some overly enthusiastic capitalization. But I have confirmed with the Department of Motor Vehicles that for purposes of some of the commercial driver's license statutes, where it says, and I'll use 27 as my example, a violation of any state law or local ordinance, that isn't just a Vermont law. That's supposed to be state, lowercase, all of the states. So the DMV has gone through and looked at all of these, and they think that all of these should be lowercase state, not just Vermont law references for the commercial driver's license language. And that's through section 30. And then you have your effective dates, but if the committee would humor me, I was just going to give you a sneak preview of 3 sections that will be in the next version of the miscellaneous motor vehicle bill. I know that some of you had printed it out or had hard copies sent, and I didn't want to give you a whole new version, but I can pull up the 3 sections and we can talk about them. And then you'll see them in the next version when we get to that point. So I'm just switching what I am sharing. Oh, I put the same thing back up. I apologize. Okay. So everything that's highlighted in yellow is new. You'll see that we just finished through section 30, which were our capitalization changes. And now we're at section 31. I'm going to make this hopefully fit the whole screen so you don't have that awkwardly double page. Better. So new language, 3 new sections. This is a recommendation from the Department of Motor Vehicles. There is new language that will become effective on, if it's not delayed again, and I'm sure Mike can tell you about the delays that have happened, will become effective on February 7th of 2022, pertaining to what the state needs to do for purposes of entry-level driver training requirements for commercial driver's licenses. So that is adding in terms of what needs to be complied with for when the commissioner cannot issue a commercial driver's license or commercial learner's permit, compliance and satisfaction of the requirements in 49 CFR Part 380. That's the new addition. And that is what is set to go into effect on February 7th of 2022. By saying as may be amended in here, if there is a delay, so say it's pushed to February 7th of 2023, then there would not need to be compliance with it because the CFR language would have been amended. The other language that you see in here with respect to the change of an act title, just in pulling up the language to look at it, I discovered that the act from 1986 was actually called the Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1986, and then Title 12 within that act was the Commercial Motor Vehicle Safety Act of 1986. So we're just trying to clean it up so the citation is correct, and then putting in some as may be amendeds in there, since that's something we do now to make it so that if we're referencing federal regs that need to be followed, we're incorporating the amendments that may happen on the federal level. And that's particularly significant here with the now adding of 49 CFR Part 380 and the new requirements around entry-level drivers, because that has been delayed. And I know the department is concerned that it might be delayed again and they wouldn't want to have to comply with something that is not actually required yet on a federal level.
So Anthea, is this written in such a way so that any future changes, not the ones that you're referencing here, so that we are sort of automatically hitching our wagon to those federal changes,
Yep.
Not only what's anticipated right now, but what could happen 3 years from now or
Yep.
4.
You got it. That's exactly the motivation behind including all these as may be amended, as
Yeah.
may be amended. And in this particular instance, as you pointed out, there's sort of more of a known possibility that there might be an amendment that we definitely want to capture.
Okay.
Hook your wagon. That's good. Okay.
Well, you remember we used to run into problems where we would reference something and then it got amended. And then we'd have to go in and update the statute to, align with the federal change. And so in past, we've tried to write it in such a way that it automatically reference it, that it automatically updates itself as federal changes are made.
Okay. Anything else?
2 more, they're quick. And we actually have language in our drafting manual to address that very issue, which is why
Okay.
I see lots of as amended.
All right.
Okay, 2 more changes or 2 more sections, both pretty straightforward. This is just has a section heading of records inspection, but there are citations in Title 23 that are inaccurate. They are to 3840 and 3842. Those sections do not exist. I have worked with the Department of Motor Vehicles to determine that they really should be references to sections 3833 and 3835. This is a technical correction, just an error we found in the statutes. And then the last one, and I'm going to need to pull up a separate screen so you can actually understand this. The second instance of accident that I didn't think I was going to be able to change was in the acronym SHARP, which I'm not going to remember what it stands for, but I do know that the A in SHARP stood for accident. So I didn't want to change an accident to a crash in an acronym and have the acronym not make sense anymore. But in doing a little bit of digging and looking into this statute, we think it can be repealed outright. The Department of Motor Vehicles has been in consultation with the Department of Public Service on that. And I will pull up what that—
Public safety, you mean?
Public safety, yes, thank you. All those acronyms, too many of them.
Mhm.
I will pull up the statute so you can actually see what it is you're repealing as opposed to just the language that says it's being repealed. Apologies, I just have to get over one more tab. So you would be repealing in its entirety section 1220, which, except for one sentence in here, is very, very specific to 1998. And I'm not entirely sure why it was included in codified law as opposed to session law. So it was requiring counties to organize and participate in at least 6 sobriety checkpoints before February 28th of 1998. Presumably that has happened. And it was requiring the purchase of 2 mobile evidentiary breath alcohol testing instruments. I'm hoping that happened in the last 22 years, saying how that they will be distributed, and then saying in fiscal year 1998, how much money was supposed to be going to particular purposes. So in consultation with those 2 departments, we think that this can be repealed. And I know that Tony has had some correspondence about that just this morning, because I didn't even know if I was going to be able to share this language with you, and could probably tell you more about what happened with SHARP, separate and apart from this statute. And then you have your effective dates, and that is your miscellaneous motor vehicle bill.
So that's, it has very little to do with anything else in motor vehicles. It's all about boats. I
It is
thought they were
very
going to have
boat.
a lot of issues. What happened? Yes, Senator Pertlick.
I know we're going to get to floor time, but I did, you might be surprised to learn, work with Anthea on some language to add. So it won't be all about boats, but an issue came up about trucks that don't have covers. So kind of what's called in other states a TARP law. So if you're carrying debris and it's flying out of the back of the truck, you need to have it secured with, and Anthea did good work on some exemptions for like salt trucks and gravel trucks and farmers. So I'll send that to the committee and to DMV for review and hopefully possible consideration for inclusion in the bill.
Okay.
Is that other states have got similar language, Andy? I assume.
Yes.
I thought we already had that covered, but I guess not. Okay.
Good pun.
Just one quick
No,
question.
the other related issue is cleaning off your vehicle. Sometimes trucks will have
Oh, that's
ice or
around,
snow.
yeah. Kurt Wright's bill for years and years and years.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And there's no way possible that we figured out how to do that. When they start off in the morning, how they're going to clean the roofs of their trucks unless they have equipment to do that. Anyway, we can bring it up for discussion. Wanda, are you still on with us?
I am here, Senator.
So that's all you have in the miscellaneous? I thought there was a whole bunch of stuff.
There's a lot of language regarding motorboats and vessels. It's been a good year. I mean, our
Wow.
team really went through and working with Anthea in the past, we've done a lot of cleanup, and we have nothing new or nothing additional at this
Wow.
time to offer.
I think that's good.
Yeah, no, it's good.
Thank you.
We must have gave Mike Smith some time off because he didn't come up with a whole bunch of stuff. You know what I mean? I thought it was.
Mike,
All right.
you're gonna email Cindy?
I already did.
Okay, all right.
Yep.
Okay, we got a couple minutes before we go on the floor. So with anything else this morning, thank you very much. It's a good morning, very productive. And with that, unless anybody else has any other comments, we're done for the morning,
Okay.
for the week,
For the
Okay.
week.
for the week. Thank you very much.
Everybody have a good weekend. Thank you.
You as
Thank
well.
you.
Thanks, everybody.
Don't take your boats out.
I'm